By all accounts and indices, the brain is powerful. Very powerful. And yet it is not so powerful as to the point of infinity. It is neither infinite in ability, capacity, or endurance. Just like every other part or organ of the human body, it has its limitations and weaknesses. And yet it remains one of the busiest and most stressed out. Most probably it actually deserves that title of one of the most stressed out or strained organ of the human system. From the moment we wake to that moment we actually fall asleep. The brain is in active formation. Even while we are asleep, the brain never all sleeps. That is only the period of its least active mode. In other words, that is basically its natural moment of ground zero. It is at that point of neural rest that the brain is able to reorganize and recalibrate itself and the rest of the body and the normal natural processes, and sets them to recover much of their lost energy in preparation for another dawn of active living. There are 3 parts to the brain, but just 2 which are critical to the topic we have in focus here. Those are the forebrain and the hindbrain. The midbrain is out of our discussion for today. So we have already alluded to the 2 types of brain work that have caught our attention for the day's lesson. Those are the processes of active brain work and passive brain work. We may also refer to them as the state of conscious brain activity or consciousness and the state of unconscious brain activity or unconsciousness. The forebrain basically manages conscious brain activity, while the hindbrain manages most of unconscious brain activity. It is good to note that word most, for the sake of reasonable clarity. Interestingly, the midbrain, which we had initially intended to drop out of this lesson, still has found a way to come back in. But as a way to quickly explain this and move on to our core topic of the day, it might just be enough to summarize simply that it is essentially responsible for those unconscious works of the brain that have specialty in the reflexes. It controls those unthought-out actions of the body which have their origin in prompts excited through the central nervous system, such as the involuntary acts of sneezing and blinking at sudden light or approaching objects. The hindbrain essentially takes care of the great majority of the rest of unconscious brain activity, from our breathing, to our heartbeats, to all the continuous workings of all our cells and organs in the body, including those basic workings of herself the brain, both while we are awake and more so clearly while we are asleep. But the power and the ability of the brain, we already noted, is finite. In particular, the power and ability of the forebrain, which controls all conscious acts or thoughts, or operations of human living. It controls all the simple tasks we carry out during our active and conscious hours. It controls all the stressful ones too, including some of the most stressful to it that in some sense generate the greatest heating upon it, such as reading and memorizing, reasoning and logic, tight focus and effort at approaching and solving math and other scientific problems. They too work overtime when we're engaged in certain sports activities that demand varied and sophisticated coordination in order to achieve the desired goal, such as when we play lawn tennis, rugby, football, or even boxing. And the stress from these do not just come from the intense thought processes that happen during those exercises. The stress also comes from the role of the brain in making sure to guide the person to stay in balance during all of the hustle and tussle. The stress also comes from guiding the eye to be constantly on the lookout in order to keep abreast of what's going on all around the field of sport. It also guides the mouth to call out with the right words for the ball, the feet to jump up for the ball, remain at a particular spot for the ball, to run forward or slide backwards in offense or defense, to calculate the most promising form of kick needed in front of the goal to get a score, to take a strong shot or a soft pass, to calculate some precise angle to shoot by and then train the feet on how to physically execute the stunt, or in tennis, how to correctly get hold of the racket and maintain the hold while keeping it flexible enough to variously direct strikes and defenses. Those are just a few of what the forebrain takes charge of during the course of a single day. For those in the offices too, they must navigate various approaches to different relationships. For instance, human relationships are different from the direct paper or computer work. The paper and computer work require much focus and concentration, and can be very stressful and energy-sapping in their own way. But when it comes to personnel relationships, an adjusting has to occur to change into a qualitatively different mode. Even among personnel, there are differences to the levels and depths in relationships. One always has to adjust to accommodate the reality of those differences. and make interactions at least bearable. Those are all mostly the job of the conscious or the forebrain to coordinate. Therefore, the forebrain represents some of the most worked up parts of the human system. So, whenever we take a rest, we should endeavor to remember that it is not only our body that we rest, we are also resting our forebrain to rejuvenate. And that is why, when we have finished stressing out the forebrain for the day, we always need to make sure to give it a break sometime, and at night. We should here bear very much in mind too that it is never only those who have physically exerted themselves during the day who feel or seek the need to rest. Those who have been at their books for prolonged periods during the day also inevitably feel that need to rest. Indeed, even the chronic layabouts during the day also eventually feel that need to rest. Therefore, it would appear, even the mere fact of consciousness assures enough stress to demand rest at a due hour. Which is why, for optimal performance, alertness and personal health, it is medically advised we keep to the healthy routine of about 8 hours of sleep every night. Not just for our bodies, but also for our brains. Especially the forebrain. There is such a thing as a tired brain. We all know that. A good nightly rest is always the good recipe for a happy brain and an enhanced and better brain function. The heart works all the time, every day, every hour, every second, and never rests for our entire life. But that is work that is already well spelt out. Everything is already set. And it just does its simple task day in, day out, and never needs to rest, except to cool down if we have overexerted it in some way, through some sport or other rigorous activity. But it already has the template it falls back to, when allowed to rest. It doesn't have to reason anything. And it's already been built very robust for that eternal pumping purpose. But the brain, the conscious brain, the forebrain, has to reason. There is much less static template for it, and it is built very evidently fragile, while simultaneously carrying a whole lot of responsibility upon such a tender frame. It has to wade through the day staying on its foundational template, but judging and adjusting, and creating and managing, and directing a person's events and activities throughout. The heart does an active job. It is only following instinct. But the conscious brain barely has instinct. It is the one which makes things happen. It is the one which plans things. It is the one which accompanies the person through their daily work. Without it, a person could not be meaningfully productive. It works just as much as the person works. It is essentially the person's closest companion. So, when the time comes eventually for the person to rest, it too must rest. And to help it serve the person best, it is necessary that one give it the essential attention and petting it requires. Find the good time to give it the rest. And endeavor, ultimately, to give it ample rest at day's end. Going for whole days without a proper night's sleep, even if there have been intermittent pauses for some rest in between work or no work, can be quite harmful for brain function. First, is the obvious issue of fatigue. With ordinary physical fatigue, productivity is quite significantly hampered. Add to that mental fatigue, and productivity is practically crippled. The ability to make quick decisions is palpably subdued. And most importantly, even the ability for making good decisions is extremely dulled and dampened. A person who operates under such circumstances of fatigue usually lacks the requisite focus for productive work, for creative interrelationships, for a normal threshold of consciousness regarding their surroundings, whether at home, in school, work, or the streets. It is a dangerous state to be in, mentally, and even physically. On the streets, they are more prone to running absent-mindedly into people or being hit by a passing vehicle while attempting to cross the road. They are more prone to driving off the roads and into pedestrians or other vehicles. It can be a very dangerous state even in other ways. They are more prone to running into trouble at school, in class, or even at workplace, which may even result to the query, suspension or termination of job. A good sleep and night's rest is essential for daily positivity, alertness, agility, productivity, and a sound overall health. Nature was so wise not only when it made the light during when we could be very alert, active and productive, but also when it made the night during when we might thus be slowed down and have the chance to rest. Mother Nature was always about the good balance. She does allow you to do whatever it is you wanted to do, but then calls back your attention later to go find a place to rest. Not just the body needs the rest, but the forebrain too. So for it to recharge, reorganize and recalibrate for the essential activities of the following day. A quite stressed out or fatigued person is well prone to emotional imbalances, short temper, depression, absent-mindedness, and error, including those of judgment and transcription. Nature has so made our brain to serve us well. It is duty-bound of us also to give it that level of respect and care it truly deserves, not only for its sake, but truly also for our own sake, for our outlook, mood, energy, healthy growth and satisfaction. We must also note that such state of undue elevated stress on the body and the brain, especially directly impacts the state of our immunity to various ailments and even simple diseases, as an overall brain fatigue makes the defense against malign external actors that much more complicated, as much available resources are already being channeled to deal with resolving that central factor of overall fatigue. Fighting on two fronts is possible, but it is usually a very difficult and nightmare proposition in a war scenario. If you found this helpful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more videos on brain health, productivity, mental wellness, and personal development.